My best advice is just remember you got this. It is all you. You absolutely can do it. You got this. Just don't forget that.
Wolfpack fans, welcome back. I'm Marcy Bullock, the host of Engineering Pack Pod, and today Jenny Hoffler, talent acquisition leader for over a decade, is here today. She has got some wonderful secrets to success for any student listeners who are wanting to make that jump from being a student to a professional. Jenny, you have interviewed thousands of people. You've been behind the scenes as people are attempting to carve out a new identity for themselves, trying to make that big leap. And you bring energy and enthusiasm to everything that you do. We were just talking pre-show about our relationship, that we've known each other for a couple of decades now. And I am so excited to welcome you to Engineering Pack Pod.
Yes, thank you for having me. And I'm so glad to have known you for all this time. We started off as neighbors. So
We did. We started off as neighbors, and I have loved following you on LinkedIn because that is one of the things that you are very active in. And I would love you to tell more about your background because honestly, I did not do you justice. So give us a little bit more about where you have been and your journey to here.
Sure. So I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill with a dual degree. I did study abroad in Seville, Spain, and I jumped into working for Credit Suisse for about 10 and a half years, then worked for Fidelity Investments, MetLife, Amazon, and now I am with LabCorp. Predominantly, I've worked in kind of the early talent, university recruiting, campus recruiting space. I'm extremely passionate about that arena. So talent acquisition, working with talent, leading programs, building programs, that's kind of been my niche.
And your niche is so important to this audience of students because they're trying to get picked for the next thing. And it is so anxiety producing when you're ready for graduation and you have all of your documents ready, your resume, you've practiced your interview, you've gone to the career fairs, and you just feel like it's a black hole out there. And the economy right now is a bit challenging. So let's start off with that one. What do you tell students who have applied and hear nothing? It's like crickets.
Yes, that feels like ghosting, as we call it, and I can completely relate to that because I also went through a period of job loss and looking for employment myself, so I have been in your shoes. I have created a spreadsheet and put countless, I think I had 195 companies on there at one point when I was applying, and it is so interesting. There was maybe only 50% or less that I actually heard anything back from, whether it was a decline or any kind of comment at all. So I tell students to persevere, to continue to be determined, to not let the lack of response or the declines to get you down, because it can feel like a lot. One week I think I had 11 declines in 1 week, and that felt like a lot of no's. So do something that brings you joy, kind of step out of it. Clearly those were not the places that you're meant to be, but keep applying, keep continuing on, and also don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's not just about applying. It's also about connecting with people. It's also about joining, organizations. You really want to kind of come at the job search from a multitude of angles.
It's so important not to just rely on advertised vacancies. You talked about relationship building, and we've hit on that a few times in this podcast, but I want to hear your take on that.
Oh, relationship building is essential. I am a huge fan of it. And I know the word networking can be a little bit obtuse, a little scary for people to hear. Even I realized during that time that I maybe wasn't even the best at networking. There is an art to networking. I even read a book from Amazon about the art of networking. Someone recommended to me. And truly, it is so important not only to connect with people in a genuine way, not just what can you do for me, but connecting with people, understanding what opportunities might be out there, knowing what you bring to the table and what you're asking for, and then also kind of concluding their time by asking what you might be able to do for them, how you might be able to share out something on their behalf. So I do think networking is a two-way street, and it's really important as a candidate to remember that. But it's also really beneficial no matter where you go. If you're in a job that you love or an internship that you are really enjoying, to keep connecting with folks. People might leave those jobs. They might go somewhere else. And you might actually, work with them again in the future. So I'm all about not burning bridges. I'm about building the bridges so that in the future, if you do happen to come together with someone again, or they recommend a role to you, or they think about you in that positive manner, that network you've built can actually really work for you. I have seen it work for me, and so that's why I definitely encourage other people to utilize their network too.
I'm glad you hit on all of that. And thank you for underline, bold, all caps, the fact that it doesn't end. It is a process that you will have throughout your entire career. And the building the bridges, ooh, that's really good. So I feel like a piece of building that possibly is the resume, because that may be the first thing someone sees. You are, correct me if I'm wrong, the person who comes to career fairs on campuses and has the initial conversation with a student, and here they are nervous, they're holding their resume, they hand it to you. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen, and what are the things you think really help a candidate when they make that first impression?
Oh my gosh, I love this question because I could talk about it forever. So, yes, I do meet the students at career fairs, and so does my team. But I would definitely say something that stood out to me this spring when I was at some career fairs. One was students who did not have a LinkedIn. That is extremely essential. I actually did a whole video about it because I was so surprised at the genuine number of students who were about to graduate or looking for internships, but they could not stay connected with me on LinkedIn because they had never set up a LinkedIn profile and didn't use it. Absolutely 100%. If you take anything from this podcast, go set up a LinkedIn account and invest in yourself, because most recruiters, I would say 99.5% of recruiters, utilize LinkedIn when we are hiring and seeking new talent. I found jobs that I've had from people reaching out to me on LinkedIn, another time for me reaching out to a recruiter on LinkedIn, another time on LinkedIn for people sharing roles with me. So that's my number one. Another thing too is I had some students stand out who had reached out to me ahead of time and then came to the table to personally introduce themselves as a follow-up. Also love it if you meet someone and then they follow up with you afterwards. Either way, both of those etiquettes of just kind of differentiating yourself. You came in person. You also are sharing why you're so interested. I would say something that has stood out to me for a less than positive reason is when someone comes by, they just tell you they need a job. Their parents want them to get a job. They need a job. Like, what can they do at this job? They know nothing about the company. That's probably not my ideal candidate. If you want to separate yourself, you come to that table. You take 5 minutes before you come to that table and you look up, what is that company about? Maybe what are some openings? What might I be able to do there? So at least you appear prepared when you're speaking with someone at the career fair and you're letting them know why you are actually really excited about their company or the possibility of working there. Preparation and doing your research is huge for me. And a lot of recruiters, it just shows that you are motivated and you're proactive, which could then translate to your job in the future.
Ooh, a lot of good stuff in that, Jenny. So, a couple things that I heard you say, and obviously they're not listeners of this podcast if they do not have a LinkedIn or they walk up and say, I don't know what your company does. So, they have done their homework, they're prepared, they have their LinkedIn profile ready. But I think there's also this feeling of, how do I get experience if I don't have experience? So for a student who is stretched very thin and they're maybe trying to do things outside the classroom, but it's hard for them to do that because they might have other responsibilities, let's say with family, how would you recommend that they get that initial foot in the door?
Okay, so that's a great point in how students can best demonstrate some of the really strong skill sets they have, although they might not have had the perfectly aligned opportunities in their eyes. And I've seen this. I've seen it when students show me their resume and they say, oh, I let's say with technology. I haven't worked at a place that does technology. I've been working at the grocery store or, working at this restaurant. And I didn't even know if I should put that on my resume. And I would say, absolutely put it on your resume. Not only are you working, going to school, so that shows time management. If you're working at a restaurant or a grocery store or anywhere else, I'm sure you've dealt with customer service. You've had to work in a team. You've had to be punctual. There's so many strong skills that you can build that you can use in a corporate or more professional environment or in a role that's maybe more aligned to what you want to do. I definitely encourage them to keep that information on there because I'm sure that examples they're going to draw from during the interview are going to come from some of those work experiences. But also, put some projects you've done. If there's projects in the class where you built a skill set, even if you weren't compensated or paid for it, definitely include those projects. If you did something pro bono for a website and, for a volunteer organization, include that as well. It's really about demonstrating the aptitude you have, the skills you've built, whether they are more soft skills in that you're working with people and you're demonstrating communication, etc., or more of the technical hard skills where you're showcasing, I use Java, C Sharp, you've worked with mainframe, whatever the case may be, some of the engineering skills you might have. But don't oversell yourself just to get your resume through. Sometimes people will list every technology they've ever used or things they've heard in class, but they can't really speak to. And I've seen where we've interviewed candidates and they listed something out as a skill, and then when asked about it, they weren't really able to speak to it and they didn't know much about it. So be authentic in your resume so that you can speak to whatever skill you've listed, that you can really own it and be accountable for it.
So I heard a couple things in there that I want to dive into. Don't undersell and don't oversell. So we've got this happy medium in here, and I'm curious about that because for many students, they think, well, I learned it. Can I put it on my resume? And you said they couldn't speak to it. So how in depth do they need to speak to it? For example, if they joined a club and they went to one meeting, well, probably don't put it on your resume because what can you say about the club? But if you learned a specific tool in a class, but you're not an expert on it, don't companies train you when they bring you on?
Yes, it depends on the role you're applying for as to the level of expertise that might be needed. So if you're going to be coding, doing software engineering in a specific language, and they want someone that has had experience and utilized that language or work with Python, let's say, if you've only learned it in class and you've never done anything practical with it, it might be a little bit more challenging. If you've done projects with it, if you have taught yourself on your own some skills, a lot of times in the interview, there'll be ways where you can demonstrate your level of expertise in a certain area. Sometimes students will say if they are a novice or if they are expert in kind of on this, I guess, pendulum, that shows the level of expertise they have in a certain area. So I've seen students do that, especially when it comes to some of the more tech-focused roles. I usually just say, be honest, but share out what you do know. And it really does depend on what the company's looking for and what the role would require. But if you come into a program whereby they say, hey, we're going to teach you everything, we're just looking for individuals who are a sponge and want to come in and want to learn, or have a computer science degree but are willing to do XYZ, then, with that program, they may train you. Some places may not. It depends on the company.
Well, my advice, and counter it if you don't agree, because I want, you're on the other side of the interview, not me. My advice is always like embellish just a little bit, but not too much.
Why is that your advice?
Because I want you to get the interview. And then if you get the interview, you can find out, do you need the novice? Do you need the more in-depth? How will you train me?
It depends on who your interviewer is. I've had some interviewers who have come back to me and said specifically what I just mentioned, which was this person listed that they had the skill. This is why we selected their resume. And then when I talked to them about it, they couldn't even speak to it. So that's why I say to really be able to own it and make sure that you feel comfortable speaking about whatever item you list as a skill. Make sure that you are really comfortable understanding how it's used and knowing about it. I had someone who embellished in saying that they were a Eagle Scout, and they were interviewed by an Eagle Scout, and it turned out they were actually a Life Scout. They hadn't done quite enough hours to become Eagle, and that interviewer was extremely upset that that's how they listed it. So I would just maybe, if you embellish with caution, I would be a cautionary tale just from what I've seen on the other side.
No, I hear what you're saying. Don't lie. And I guess maybe it's the definition of embellish. Like, try to make it sound, maybe it's a novice, but don't undersell. And that's kind of like where I end up on the continuum. So let's get into the interview. All right, so let's assume they were honest in their interview, maybe just a touch of emphasizing things because they want to stand out. I want to know what you're really looking for. What are some secrets behind this? Because the recruiter has something in mind when they're talking to you.
Ooh. So especially on your first round interview, it'll typically be with a, university campus recruiter, the initial recruiter for this phone screen to determine if they should move you forward to a hiring manager. So this is an extremely important phone call that you absolutely want to prepare for. And I do see that people do not always take the time to prepare. Something that has stood out is that we've seen people who didn't know anything about the company that they were interviewing with, who didn't have questions to ask at the end, but also they didn't seem to know a lot about the role itself and why they wanted the role past just getting a job. So I would say the research and preparation is truly a differentiator during the interview. And also aspects that we're looking for, a lot of times, particularly in the first round, it is your communication skills, your level of proactiveness and motivation. Do you bring a level of intrigue about the company, the role, the job itself, like what you would bring to the firm of like why you're interested to do it? And sometimes that doesn't always convey in these phone screens. But mostly it's just about how you present yourself and how eager you are to learn and contribute and kind of collaborate with others. Because in almost every role, there will be an element of having to work with other people, whether to share an idea or concept you want to rally people to work in a project team. So that is a component that you will, likely demonstrate on the phone as well.
Did you ever bomb an interview?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, do tell. We want the real juice on this. And how did you recover?
Oh, I definitely bombed the first interview I had with Amazon. That one was pretty brutal. It was a virtual interview. I had issues getting my technology together. So that's definitely something you want to practice, have good to go ahead of time. And I do think that even though I had kind of prepared before that, I was so frazzled that I even had trouble answering some of the questions. We ended up having to do it off camera. But I recall that some of the questions they asked me, I didn't even feel fully prepared for. So one thing I would say is a lot of times folks on the resume and during interviews want to understand data and metrics from you. You need to be able to quantify something that you've done. If you reached a goal, well, what was your output? How many? If you say that you were really good in this, you would demonstrate it by backing up because I took it from 20% to 40%, or, I increased by 500, XYZ, whatever the case may be. But a lot of times people will be a little bit vague in interviews and not quantify. And they asked me a data focused question and my mind went blank. I couldn't answer anything. So it was pretty bad. And I felt it was going bad, and I knew afterwards there would be no second interview. And I thought to myself at that moment, that was in January, I would never, interview with Amazon again. I wouldn't even apply. And what is wild is the December of that year, I was on LinkedIn and I saw some roles shared by a recruiter with Amazon Web Services, and I ended up reaching out to her, being interested in the role, and she did a call with me right before New Year's, and I ended up getting hired, and I started there that February. And so it really came to full circle to know, don't count yourself out. However, during those 11 months in between, I really did some work on myself and my interview styles, my preparation, and all the things, so that I would be 110% more prepared in the future. You can have imposter syndrome. You can definitely doubt yourself. You can be really hard on yourself about it, which I was, all those things. And also, it can end up working out for you in the future when it's time. So,
happy ending. So the first time around, you thought, oh my goodness, you didn't get the next interview. And we've all been rejected. I don't think there's anyone that can say, unless you're just sitting on the bench and never getting in the game, that you've never been rejected before. And you talked about how all of a sudden your confidence was going down and you felt nervous. When you were feeling those nerves, what are some things that you would recommend for folks when they are also having just that heart pounding, sweating, just everything is coming up? Like, I'm certain that I'm in this podcast. What word am I going to say wrong? I'm going to make a mistake, right?
Yes, I know it's different strokes for different folks, and everyone has different ways that make them feel more calm. You can ask for someone to repeat a question again. You can say, can I have just a minute to think about that? And people will say, oh, yeah, no problem. They'll give you time to kind of sit and think so that you're not just automatically responding with the first thing that came to your mind. That way, you are giving a thoughtful response. You're just kind of taking a moment to think through how you'd like to best respond, and that's perfectly all right. You should definitely prepare yourself the night before. I know that I've echoed this a lot, but I want to say you will feel more confident if you feel like you take time the day prior or the weekend prior and just kind of organize your thoughts. Think about the examples of when you have had an excellent experience doing something, when you really demonstrated a skill set, when you worked on a team project. As you think through those, it'll help build your confidence in yourself. You need to remind yourself that you deserve this role, that you deserve this opportunity, that you are a good fit for this job, because that confidence will come through during the interview. So the more you prepare, the less nervous you'll feel. There's always nerves. I always have nerves. No matter what interview I've done, I've always had nerves. But you need a little bit just to kind of keep you, paying attention, focused in the game, doing a little bit of, research about the company. That way, when you're talking, you can drop in things that you had learned about the company and also how you connect with them.
Well, as a recruiter, you've talked to so many different people, and I'm sure you've had to give people rejections, but you've also said you got the job, which is what we want everyone to hear.
Yes.
So, moving into that piece of it, what if you get the job and you just think you hit on that imposter? I don't know what I'm doing.
Like once you've started the
Right.
job? Okay. You had me going on the path of I loved calling students and giving the job offer. The calls to tell someone they got a job. Sometimes I've had students cry. Those are like the best calls ever. It's like they're so excited that they got the offer, and it's brought me such joy. That's always my favorite. But when students start, and I've seen this year over year over year, it can be overwhelming. Like, you're super excited. This is awesome to come into, but also there's a little bit of imposter syndrome, and you're just overwhelmed at the sheer volume of information that you're learning. And I think it could be that way whether you're a student or just a new employee anywhere. It's a new organization. You have so many different faces. You're trying to learn the leadership structure, who's in which groups, and also just information about the company and about your new role and your responsibilities. You could get a headache from that. I mean, that's just a lot coming at you at once. So I usually tell particularly students to have some grace with themselves, try to make some notes, use their notes app, whatever kind of works best for them. If they want to use a spreadsheet, Word doc, whatever. But try to organize their thoughts. They're meeting a lot of people. Write down who you're meeting. Write down some of the things you learned about those people to kind of remind yourself with cues in the future. When I started at Amazon, my manager was on maternity leave. The person who was managing me had 250 people who reported into him. He did not have time to meet with me. So as I wanted to learn what I was supposed to be doing in my role. So I asked the team who was working for me, but as I went to meetings, every single person who I would see on the screen, whose name I didn't know, I would just start sending them invites. At first, it was all the people that looked really kind and on screen, and then it was just literally anybody whose name was on screen. Number one, I built a network. Number two, I learned what they were doing in their roles, which helped me understand what I should be doing or expectations or making sure I wasn't missing things in my roles. Number three, I learned a lot more about the organization, its connectiveness, and when I met them in person in Seattle in the future, I had already built relationships with them. So I kind of felt like that was a silver lining to not have a manager to give you guidance and kind of spoon feed information to you. You had to jump in and learn it all. And that's what I would tell students to do. Jump in and learn it all, and then you won't feel that kind of imposter syndrome.
And it's okay to ask questions.
Being curious is extremely important for your own growth and to show that you're engaged.
Jenny, I can't believe how fast this has gone. So, last question I have is, what are some unwritten rules of the workplace that every student should know going in?
I would definitely say professional etiquette is a really big piece. It's something that we're not always seeing as much of. And it's very important. So reaching out kindly via email, wanting to set up time with people, utilizing your calendar to make sure that you don't miss. A lot of students aren't used to using Outlook, but a lot of companies will use a tool like that or Google Calendar to set meetings and connect people together. I think that sometimes students will kind of sit and wait for people to come to them or tell them what they should be doing next. And a company is not like school. There won't be a syllabus with all the deadlines of everything due given to you on day one and somebody checking in all along the way to kind of see how you're doing. It's not always like that. You will have to have the onus on yourself to make sure that you know what you should be doing when things are due. If somebody asks you to do something, double check it on the deadline. After a meeting, sending a follow-up to ensure that you're on the same page and that you both have the same understanding. So I call that etiquette to say it's just a really good recommendation and idea of how to carry yourself in this professional environment where you're building relationships and also building your own brand. Since you are new to the company, since you are recently from school, a lot of people can appreciate that and are even more open to talking to you, answering your questions, explaining things to you because you don't have that history. But sending a follow-up note of gratitude afterwards, an impact award showing your gratefulness or thankfulness. If somebody helps you along the way, taking them to coffee. These are just small little acts that can have a really big impact with somebody that you work with, and just it really showcases your personal brand well. So you do want to kind of think about that as you go along the way. Not necessarily sitting at your desk, looking at your phone, wait until your manager tells you the next thing. What else can you do or learn? How can you get ahead? Coming to a meeting with an agenda. If you're meeting with your manager one-on-one, having items already ready to go that you want to share, talk about. It's just really good practice.
Wow, that was wonderful. I know our listeners learned so much today. Jenny Hoffler, who is our talent acquisition leader for over a decade. Thank you for being here, Jenny.
Yes, thanks for having me. It's my favorite topic to talk about, as you can tell. I loved it, so I really appreciate it. And my best advice is just remember, you got this. It is all you. You absolutely can do it. I remember calling a friend and telling her before one of her interviews, you got this. Just don't forget that, or keep reminding yourself of that, and you will. You'll have it.
Wonderful.
Yes. Woo!